Hey everybody, it's Spear here, back with another Dragon Ball TCG video. Now that we've done almost all our Type 101s, I do know for set 11 I have the Black Goku archetype that I have left, so I will be jumping onto that hopefully this week. It might come out during the weekend, we'll see when I sneak it in. But generally here we've had the Draft Box 6 reveals, and I just want to make sure that we start covering some of the topics about it, right? So we've got almost all the reveals today. Android did the yellow reveal, which is amazing. So the only things that are really left are black and like the campaign rares. I can't remember. I think they're Giant Force rares. I'm not too sure what they're called. But generally, I think it's time we start, discussing some of these cards. We've seen Eggman start to deck build. On my end, I just want to touch base on understanding Silver Bullets. Now, when we're talking Silver Bullets, obviously I'm talking about the My series of cards where it's like blue directed hate. But I don't want to just crusade and say this is bad, even though I don't think it's all that great. But I just want to get the conversation going as to understanding not only what Silver Bullets, but why Silver Bullets, and just kind of their place in the game as is now and in the game moving forward. Oh boy. So it looks like my head is a little too big, but essentially what is a Silver Bullet to provide context to the conversation? They're cards that typically target and hose a single strategy or aspect of a deck in a meta. Generally, they're introduced to fix a meta without having to ban cards, and we're going to see some examples of that in the next couple of slides. But generally, that's what they're there for. They're saying, hey, there's some aspects of this strategy that we need to fine tune a little bit or have answers to, and generally Silver Bullets are extremely specific but efficient ways of targeting one specific thing. There's some variation between answers and bullets, but we'll jump right into that in a second. When we're talking other TCGs, let's say in Magic we're talking Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace says when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards, and if a card would be put into the graveyard, it goes into exile instead, which is like the Banish Zone, which is Warp for Dragon Ball, all that stuff. A very specific card, right, hates exclusively the graveyard. In some matchups, it is a completely dead card, does absolutely nothing. But in those matchups where you're very specifically targeting that one deck, it is a huge blowout. In Magic specifically, you get this down against a Dredge deck, odds are game one, Dredge probably can't do anything, for example. In Pokemon, Bronzong is a fantastic example. It has Heat Proof, which prevents it from being dealt damage by fire Pokemon. Does nothing against, like the other, 6-7 different types in Pokemon, but against fire, it's a complete and utter blowout. And if your opponent happens to be playing a fire deck where it's all fire Pokemon, running Bronzong and having that the only thing on board means that you probably just straight up win the game. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's just one of those aspects of the game where it's like, here's this very specific thing I do to shut down this one specific thing. And there was a tournament won by a Steel deck specifically because it was running this card. And Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm having a harder time finding Silver Bullets, but here I would say Artifact Lancia. What it does is essentially prevents you from being able to banish cards for the rest of the turn. So while it's not as Silver Bullet-y as other Silver Bullets in other games, it's just one of those things where it's a very specific answer to a very specific thing that a deck or archetype is trying to do. I want to differentiate that though from punishes. Some cards punish you for playing a certain strategy or playing a certain color. I want to make sure that we differentiate the fact that these are cards that kind of change the way you have to go into a matchup, or that you need to prepare yourself when you're playing that deck and expect something coming. But generally, they're more proactive and they're trying to fight you head on as opposed to preventing you from doing what you're doing. So for example, we have Shun. It's a blocker. When you play this card, place up to 2 cards from your deck to your drop area. And if this card attacks and your opponent is red or blue, it gets 15k power for the turn. So it's a 30k beater for a 3 cost. Nowadays, that's not great, but at the time, that was pretty significant power boost. And it specifically targets red or blue decks. You guys are, and at the time those were very defensive colors in the game, still very much are. You know what, you're playing those colors, I'm going to beat into you. Didn't see as much play as Haru though, for example, which is critical. When you play this card, again, you mill yourself. And when you play this card, if your opponent's leader card is green or yellow, you get to untap up to 4 of your energy, which was insane. It's still an insane card to this day because you're netting 1 energy. It's a 15k free critical attacker. Again, punishes your opponent, but it doesn't come down until turn 3. It can be removed, it can be dealt with. While it is a punish for the fact that you are playing a certain thing or strategy or color, it doesn't inherently stop that color. And it's very answerable, like Burnished Bonds Borgos. When you play this card, draw a card once per turn. During your opponent's turn, if your opponent switches their energy in tactic mode, so essentially this is typically like when you use a bean, or if you were playing Soul Striker, anytime Soul Striker would proc off his ability, then your opponent has to sack an energy. Or similar, Isekai Keeping Watch, when you play this card, draw a card, and then during your turn, if your opponent plays a battle card, they have to send a card from their hand to the bottom of the deck. These are more so trying to prevent your opponent from doing what their deck wants to do, but they're very easy to answer, right? So this is one of those things where I'm going to punish you from doing what you want to do, but I'm not going to entirely prevent it. Or if I do prevent it, there is a simple way for you to answer it, because games need to be interactive. They need to be back and forth. So we look at the first silver bullet, or at least the first silver bullet that I can recall as being part of the game, since this is kind of my era. If there were any in set 1, set 2, I wouldn't know. I'm fairly certain this is the first one. Answering Unwavering Solidarity Shugesh. Shugesh essentially letting you free play a 3-drop or less Saiyan from your hand, which is absurd even to this day. This ability is absolutely broken. Instead of banning Shugesh, which they should have done way sooner, they decided to instead print Time Control Cronoa. Deflect, when you play this card, draw 1 card, and then for the rest of the game, anytime a battle card with super combo tries to play a card, it doesn't do that. Eventually, they just straight up ban Shugesh because they realize this is way too powerful. Not only is there like no way to answer, it has Deflect, which means it's guaranteed to get its effect off, which means if your opponent sees Cronoa, your super combos are dead the rest of the game. You still got a 10k boost, but who cares? The only reason you're running Shugesh is for the free play. Now, it sets up this kind of thing where now every single deck needs to have Time Control Cronoa. And any game that comes between Shugesh and another deck becomes, do you see your Cronoa before I see my Shugesh? Which makes for a really unhealthy format, especially when you're considering for the fact that decks should never have auto includes, or at least there should be a reason for the auto include outside of, if I don't do this, I just lose according to what's in the meta. Which the metagame then becomes this like weird rotation of, are people playing a Shugesh deck? Okay, then I don't need to bring Cronoa, and then the Shugesh players realize that Cronoa is no longer being played, so they metagame that tournament by bringing it in. And it generally just makes for this unfun back and forth teeter-totter between the silver bullets and the broken card. So eventually Shugesh just got banned, which now means that Cronoa isn't really played anymore, but that's okay, because it means every deck doesn't have an auto include of 2 to 4 cards. So then we start looking into what kind of silver bullets are there, because there are some that, while I don't think silver bullets are the way to handle the game, I think we should empower colors as opposed to trying to stagnate others. There are different kinds. Specifically here we'll look at strategy bullets. Strategy bullets are ones that like will hit a very specific strategy, and like I said, good silver bullets are very specific as well as being efficient. Here we have Dende as an example. When you deflect, when you play a draw card, and then activate 2 if your opponent has more energy than you and they ramped, you get to blow 1 up. Very similar vein, Force Ejected Mass Saiyan. At the start of your turn, if you've charged and your opponent has more energy than you, then you get to blow up 1 of their energy. These are very specific. You know, some harder to answer than others, but you can, right? You can answer Dende in this day and age of counterplays. You absolutely can answer Force Ejection Mass Saiyan. And generally, these will hit a very specific thing. You know, so while yes, ramp is, let's say, a very blue thing. Actually, it's almost predominantly a blue thing. It hits a very specific aspect of blue, which means that it's very versatile and there's play around. You can play around this, right? Like, let's say you're afraid of Dende or Force Ejection Mass Saiyan, then don't ramp until you can like burst ramp, let's say, you know? It doesn't matter if you're going to be able to play your 1 Dende next turn. I'm going to go ahead and play a regular game, and then on turn 4, maybe I ramp 3 energy. And then maybe from there, I'm able to be explosive and get my plays off. And even if you do set me back by a turn, that was able to put me far enough in the lead that I can mitigate the fact that you have a silver bullet. On the other spectrum, specific to Dragon Ball, there's color bullets. And these are the ones that are problematic, and they've been identified as problematic because they've been banned. So we have Tianjin on Returning Fire. Permanent, if your opponent leader card is red or blue, reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 3. So it's a 1 cost, 15k. And then auto, when you play this card, your opponent can't switch energy to active mode with a non-awakened skill until the end of your opponent's next turn. Just on the back that this is a 15k 1-drop beater if your opponent is red or blue is busted. And then you add on top of that it prevents blue from essentially doing the entirety of the blue identity is absolutely absurd. Or even on the other end, we have Mercenary Tower with the Strainer. Barrier, permanent if your opponent's leader card is green or yellow. Reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 1. So it is a 1 cost. And then auto, once per turn. When a card in your hand is placed in your drop area by an opponent's skill, your opponent chooses 3 cards in their hand and sends them to their warp. So it has barrier, it's a 1 drop, and essentially for doing what green is trying to do, you know, hand destruction isn't just, you know, specific to one green deck or archetype. Almost every single green deck has hand destruction components built into the color. Again, just another thing that punishes that color from doing what it wants to do. It's hard to deal with, hard to answer, and generally really cripples down not just a strategy, but an entire color. And when they banned these cards, they specifically said that these card effects create a one-sided and unfun play pattern, going against your goal to create an enjoyable game with lots of interaction decision making. And that's what it really comes down to. Cards like these reduce the level of interaction, unlike the other previous bullets, reduce the ability to play around them, and really make it so that your color has so few ways of dealing with it that if these cards get played in a proper manner, you probably just can't do anything about it. And at no point do we ever want to get in a card game where there's a situation where you can't do anything just because you picked a color. Which brings us over to the Mai and King Pilgos cards, which I say are a regression. We are going back to that previous thing where and mind you, every single color, we don't know about black yet, but so far every main color of the game is getting one of these cards where it says if your opponent switches their energy to active mode using a counter skill, which every single relevant blue counter does untap energy, you get to place up to 1 card in your opponent's life and 1 of their energy in drop area. So now you're not getting back the energy that you untapped and you're losing a life. And it has barrier, which means it's not interactable. For blue, I honestly looked, and like, you know, if there were fair ways for blue to interact with this, like let's say the red Sensu Bean, fine. But what, are we gonna Final Hope Slash? Okay, counterattack, bounce a card ignoring barrier back to their hand. Well, I mean, bouncing back is really bad considering it costs 1 and they can just play it again. Oh, and now they just plus the card because they get to draw a card again off of that 1 card. All right, so let's get rid of it way more serious fashion. Okay, fine, then the next best option is Barrier of Hope, which is a 3 cost, which again bounces back to their hand. Oh, and add an activate main. So there's just no real clean cut answers, and I feel like this was done to preemptively put the brakes on Baby. I think there was an expectation from Bandai that Baby was going to be by far the best deck in the format, and because of that, the next set, and mind you, like the set releases right now are kind of iffy because of like how the pandemic has dealt with everything, but generally this is where I'm thinking it's coming from, the fact that they were expecting Baby to be a blowout deck, and because of that, here's the next set to kind of remedy the fact that blue is insane. But I don't think that's the way we should go about it. And, you know, Android very much said this in his own reveal video today, which I highly recommend you guys go and watch, where he said we should be powering up other decks. We should be making other decks on par. We shouldn't be pulling back and making decks unplayable. If this was specific to like one thing that a strategy does, then I totally understand. But the fact that it essentially targets the entirety of blue's identity, which is untapping, at least the defensive aspect of it, I think really hits a sore spot, and it isn't the way I would like the game to move forward in regards to answering issues in the game, especially on the fact that every single color gets one. It'd be a little bit better, like not much, but a little bit better if it was just the fact that green's matchup against blue, let's say, was utterly unwinnable, and green was the only one to get one of these cards to kind of mitigate that. But because every single color gets one, this essentially says blue becomes a nearly unplayable color come next set. And while I do understand that there's the play run where like, oh, well, just don't untap energy. Well, no, I'm sorry, but not doing what your color's supposed to do isn't an answer to, you know, issues in the metagame or bullets in the metagame. Because if the answer to my deck effectively forces me to not play my color like it's meant to be played, why am I playing that color at all? And that's generally my quick, brief summary on their trying to understand silver bullets in our game, where they come from, why are they existing, and just kind of the history behind it. Generally, I think silver bullets should be really held back unless absolutely necessary. And even then, I think if there really is an issue in the game that warrants silver bullets, it might just be better to give an axe to that deck specifically because it's such an issue. I believe in letting the metagame trying to adapt, and I think bringing these in before there's even a proven fact that a deck will be oppressive is disheartening to blue players and dangerous for the game as a whole. But generally, we're just gonna have to wait and see what kind of impact this does have. I'm probably still gonna try and force blue regardless of these cards, but who knows, maybe I'm just trying to making a mistake. I just think there are better ways to design answers for a meta than going the route of printing cards like Mai and that entire cycle of blue hate. That said, what is your take on silver bullet? Do you guys like them in the game? Do you think they're really problematic? Let me know in the comments down below. If you guys liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Hey, if you thought it was bad, thumbs down works too. And if you guys want to see more of my content, I'm going to be posting all of my tournament videos for the rest of the week. We did 4 rounds during the Premier Online Tournament Finals, and your boy made top 8. So with that, if you guys want to go ahead and watch that, and you want to be notified for when that happens, then go ahead and click the subscribe button. And other than that, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.